Doing a little porting tonight. I have several things to port, but finishing up carburetors. This is the one that's got to go together. You can see that it's the matte black that everybody likes. Base plates ready to go together. The only thing that hasn't been done to this is thin throttle shafts. Oh wait, just a little bit, my bad. They're hand thinned, they're not machine thinned. So the point of this video is just to kind of cover some of the stuff that, I don't know, I guess there's several things that, I mean, I see what the overall industry, when you get into modern carburetors, you know, these older bodies, what they are, they're made up of this material here is zinc. Okay, so this material is nice only in the sense that it's easy to move. I mean, I've been machining stuff for several years, but you know, this stuff it can be your friend and it can be kind of a pain in the butt. If you allow things like threads and such to gall, there's basically there's no saving that thread. It's going to gall and it's going to actually destroy it. The only meaning is this material is so soft, it's almost lead. Okay, me personally, I haven't found a way to weld on it. I just feel that it's kind of pointless to do that. But the point of the video is basically, as you can see, this started out as an old school Holley. You know, and when I say old school, if you would have noticed, like your HPs have this radius, and that would actually, you know, it would be copied. The rear would be copied. I mean, obviously there's more casting up in here, but on the flow bench it will yield. This here will yield within 5 to 10% of what an HP style main body will. The only downfall is the fact that if the customer wants to apply the technology to their own main body or just buy a main body. I do several things. Obviously I'll go and you can mill this off straight, keep your air cleaner ring. I basically will remove a majority of that air cleaner ring when I go up on several stages, only in the sense that this allows me to get a bigger radius up on the top of right above the venturi. Right above the venturi is a real critical area. You'll see a lot of turbulence right above that, depending on the size of this venturi, of course. But I'll go a step further basically and mill this down and then radius all this. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here at all. There's several other builders out there that do the same thing. The only difference is I'm trying to cover what I'm actually doing and actually achieving for the money. So I can give you pictures all day long, show my happy little face with my dirty face, and you know, look at what I can do, and I ported your carburetor, and hey, look at me, send me your carburetor. That's not my goal. My goal is to share with you the things that I've learned over the years. According to, you know, some other car builders, there's so many car builders out there nowadays, but I just try to stay basic and stay away from the competition, so to speak, just because it allows me to, it gets me off in a zone to where I don't want to be. But basically what happens here is with this zinc, when you go and apply sand roll and stuff like that, you know, the material isn't opened up. I'm going to try to, what I'm going to attempt to do is pause the video, do the next stage, and then talk about that as well. But the next stage for me is to bead blast this, and essentially what this stuff is so soft, what happens is it will actually put a generous radius on what you couldn't get by hand. It's almost to the point where it shot peens, like your connecting rods, and your cast material is made up of cast material. So when you have a cast material, obviously that material is going to be, you know, in some way, shape, or form filled with voids. So when you shot peen, say a connecting rod, an OEM connecting rod, essentially what you're doing is you're packing the material. Okay, so the kind of the same applies with this. Is it kind of does two separate things. Is one, it'll free up some of the sharp edges and burrs and radius, some of the stuff that you couldn't achieve by hand. Along with what the bad part is what happens is it will actually make the metal porous. I mean, if you take a magnifying glass, I have these inspection sight glasses you put in for jewelers or whatever, up to say even a 5 times. If you go and magnify that, you'll see that this material is porous. And the first indication, I know this sounds really kind of far-fetched, but the first indication of porosity, or that this metal has actually become virgin, so to speak, or actually opened the pores, is if you have, say, a dirty finger, and after I bead blast that, what happens is if I rub across that, what happens is you'll notice that has created a trail of dirt. Well, that's because this metal has become porous. So there's two different ways to alleviate that. If I leave this thing in as cast form, which I personally don't like to do because I'm personalizing the carburetor for the customer at the same time. So what I like to do is, there's a couple different things. There's a candy color that I apply. Has several different powder coats that I use. A lot of it's been said that powder coat doesn't belong in carburetor business. Well, that may be, but not everybody can get a hold of hard coat or Teflon coat. I'm not dropping my carburetors off to another vendor to finish. I'm doing everything in-house, and if I have control over every aspect of the product, then I'm going to go ahead and go with that. The powder coat is said that it doesn't belong in the carburetor business because it flakes off and there's other things. Well, if you have a machining state of mind or a mentality, if you will, you know, obviously your faces need to be trued up. All gasket surfaces need to be trued. As far as the flaking, I mean, if you have common sense to know that, you know, once you come onto the mains, and if your booster, anything under the booster housing is going to be, once you're drawing the mains, is going to be wet, correct? So it's just common sense to not apply powder coat. If it does get there, I mean, that does get finished as far as not having it there. The same goes for this metering surface and the base plate surface. So, but, you know, the boosters, that's a whole nother story. The powder coat, as far as flaking is concerned, that is 100% lack of cure process. So if it is flaking off like it's paint, I mean, anybody can take a spray can and buzz it and actually achieve the same results. I've had products in here that are the same way. I can take a sharp edge of whatever and scrape on it and damn near scrape it off, and it's advertised as powder coat. Well, I'm not buying it. So a powder coat, in my opinion, should be to the point where it actually, if you break the surface, because think of powder coat as a plastic coating, okay? Plastic coating, there's several different plastics, but if you put that on, essentially when you're applying the heat at 400 degrees, you're allowing that plastic to melt and flow. So common sense tells you that if you break that plastic coating, obviously you're going to have a failure point. So powder coat, if it's cured correctly, in my opinion, obviously everything that I've ever done has always been self-taught. There's no classes on this stuff. It's top secret. Carburetor business is top secret. You're a dummy, and I'm not, and I'm great, and I know what I'm doing, so send it to me. I'm not trying to achieve that. I know what I know because I've self-taught my stuff, and got a flow bench over here that I've done several R&D things on, booster signal, several different things that might apply and may not apply. I'm not saying I'm the greatest freaking carburetor guy in the world. All I'm saying is I just think that I have somewhat of a competitive edge and a poor man's outlook on the sense that this stuff isn't really top secret. It shouldn't be top secret. So, like I said, I have two choices. I have either powder coat this, and essentially what that does is the porosity factor that I explained. If you were to think about that, if you were to put this on the flow bench, you're going to see that this carburetor, if I was to flow this and build it in media blasted form, it would actually flow less. And the only reason I say that is because what happens is if this metal has become so porous that if you were to magnify it, you're going to see little jagged edges. So if you can think, say down in this Venturi, if I have a media blasted carburetor, all these little jagged edges, that's going to want to shear that edge. So what happens is you get a bunch of turbulence, and that overall porous material will actually catch air and restrict it in a sense. And what happens is if you restrict air, you create heat. So I have two choices. I need to seal, when I show you that if I can achieve this video the way I want, I will show you the bead blasted version. So I have two choices. I go in here and with a Dremel, and I wire wheel. If you wire wheel this after it's media blasted, it will actually seal this material back up to the point where it becomes not abrasive or non-friction point. Okay, so I can either do that or I can powder coat it. Well, the powder coat will actually seal the material back up, and we'll get it back to good flowing air. So that's my disagreement on how powder coat doesn't belong in the carburetor business. It's a poor man's approach to, I guess, lack of better words, the scientific part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this video, hopefully, and get back to where I was with a different look body. Well, there you go. I do believe that I have achieved what I wanted to do, and that was a paused video. And now I'm picking up back where I still got more hand finishing here to do. Okay, so what I've done here is, obviously you see the media blast. What that has done is generously blended everything together. These boosters are going to get separately reworked, and unfortunately I'm not going to show that because that is where the horsepower is, in my opinion. It may or may not be more or less than the next guy, but I've learned throughout the years that you can educate people only so far, and some of it just becomes you're giving your secrets away. And I have learned that once you give your secrets away, then the credit is not given where is need be. So that being said, I just keep some things to myself now. I have other parts to Media Blast. This one here, what if I were going to do a candy color, okay, what I would do is actually, this is the bead now watch. Well, of course it's not going to show. That actually becomes very porous and will actually drag dirt off my fingers. So what happens is I need to close those pores back up. And back to what we had discussed before, if that air sees any kind of friction point, it's going to create heat and a whole lot of other things. I'm not going to go into that, as there's probably other builders that or people that'll laugh this, and I really don't care. All I'm trying to accomplish here is to show what I do, and I enjoy it, and it's things that I've achieved over the years, and what better way to share it if you can. So the next step, if I were to candy coat this, what I would do would go in here with a wire wheel and a Dremel, and I'll actually close these pores back up. Okay, that would do two things. One, it would add a metallic backer for your candy, because your candy is transparent. So anything behind that color will actually reflect the color, and it will either make it pop or make it a total fail. So this one, it's really not necessary because it's going to be a solid color. So the solid color, in a sense, with this abrasive finish, will do two things. One, it will allow the powder coat to grip, and if it's cured correctly, it won't flake, and the fuel won't attack it within reason. Okay. Now, if you set it in fuel for a couple hours, of course it's going to attack it. But normal use, it's not going to attack it if it's cured correctly. So it will fill in all your voids on the material, and it will add. Since you're doing that, you're closing the pores, okay, and then you're giving it a finish for the powder coat to adhere to. So now, if I was to take this main body and build it as cast, which I've done before, looks like shit, but it actually performs well. My goal is obviously performance. So if I can allow it to perform really well and make more horsepower than the next guy, then I'm going to do it. But in the long run, I'm going to make it look good and make the customer happy due to the fact that it matches their combination. So the powder coat for me is just to kind of seal everything up and allow me to personalize the carburetor for the customer. And then when you take a picture of the carburetor as in finished form, it just looks like a very impressive piece. At least I try to. And I've been wanting to do, but the time involved is really kind of, you could actually take any kind of tooling, that fits this radius, would be like a 2.5 even a surface mill. I have a 3-flute surface mill, and I actually bring it in here and actually cut the side of it and actually make it up that radius. But the only problem is just not enough material right there. If that was all solid up in there, then I would probably do that, because then you would end up with basically an HP main body. So I had hoped that I had covered some stuff to where anybody can hopefully relate to it and kind of open your eyes as far as what to look for next time. Thanks.